Okay, we're going to talk in this section of our microeconomic tutorials about this concept called elasticity. Elasticity. I'm not sure where the term came from, but we're going to make our best use of it. What we're talking about when we spend the next, I suppose, hour or so talking about elasticity of demand, realize that we are talking about elasticity of supply because the formulas are exactly the same, whether we're talking about elasticity of demand or elasticity of supply. So we're only going to talk about elasticity of demand, and what we say about that will apply to elasticity of supply. In this formula right here, we could just take out the percentage change quantity demanded and put in a little s there. We're talking about percentage change quantity supplied. So that's the amount of change we're talking about. So let's talk about elasticity and what it means in terms of microeconomic theory. Let me start with an analogy. Analogy is this is something that is like this thing over here. So if you understand this thing, then you can better understand that thing over there. So the analogy is what I call the price pressure analogy. And I'm going to make this analogy between the concept of price elasticity of demand and physical pressure. I've noticed that when springtime comes, the co-eds on campus tend to be very, very health conscious. It's been a long winter and we don't get any sunshine to speak of, and the sunshine on our body is what creates vitamin D. It's manufactured right on our skin. And so ladies become very health conscious because they want good bone mass, and you got to have vitamin D in order to simulate calcium to have bone mass. Of course, elderly women have problems with osteoporosis and loss of bone mass, and they're very concerned about bone mass, just like young men are concerned about muscle mass, big muscle mass. Well, ladies are more concerned about bone mass. So we got to get this sunshine in order to get this vitamin D. And as human beings, sometimes the ladies will have more skin exposed. That's why they're doing it in the springtime, I'm sure. And they sometimes overdo it and have too much exposure of their skin to the sun at one time. And so when they come to class, someone just barely touches them on the shoulder and say, "How you doing, Susie?" And Susie goes, "Oh, ow, ooh, ooh." Normally, you could touch them on the shoulder and there's no sensitivity to pressure at all. But if there's a sunburn on the shoulder, the slightest amount of pressure gives a pretty dramatic jump away, a pretty dramatic response. Now, if you can keep this analogy of a little bit of pressure creates a big response, or a little bit of pressure creates no response at all, and take that analogy and transfer that over into a change in price, then you're getting a picture for what this concept of elasticity is all about. Because what we're going to see is if we change the price just a little bit, and people react like crazy, like, "Oh, this is a really big deal," and they change their behavior a lot, that means that price, the demand for that good, is highly elastic. They're very sensitive to price change. But if we change the price a lot and people don't change their behavior, they buy the same amount as they always do, then we would say the elasticity of demand is inelastic. Just like if we touch someone's shoulder and you get a big response to a little bit of pressure, they're very responsive to that. Or you can slap them on the back and they still don't notice. They're insensitive to pressure. So that is the price pressure analogy of what we mean by elasticity. Let's go to one more item here. And I could, just to be a little bit more specific, although it's really categorized elasticity of demand, it might make more sense if we said price elasticity of demand, is because you go through the chapter and you'll see there's elasticity applied to more than just one thing. So what we'll be talking about is price elasticity of demand. Now let's talk about the formula. Now, when I took my undergraduate microeconomics class, this was the symbol for elasticity of demand. There are other symbols in other textbooks, capital E, P, and all sorts of things. But this is the one that I remember because it's hard to change old dogs to new tricks, and this is what I remember. So this sticks in my mind as elasticity of demand. And elasticity of demand, the formula is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. So the bad news is you've just got to memorize that. There's no way around it. You've just got to memorize what is elasticity of demand. It's percentage change in quantity divided by percentage change in price. That is the formula, and we're going to expand what we call this short version of the formula to a larger version, but let me try to bring it into this price pressure analogy just right off the bat. Let's say that we change the price, let's say we raise the price of our good by 10%. That's this down part here. We're going to raise the price by 10%. Well, we know from the law of demand that if you raise the price, the quantity demanded is going to go down. So this quantity demanded is going to go down. Let's say we raise it by 10% and wow, our sales get cut in half. We only raised it 10% and we lost half of our sales volume. Well, if we cancel out the percent, we cancel out the zeros, we got 5 over 1, which would be an elasticity of 5. Again, we're saying when we change the price, do people react a lot or a little? Let's change it. Let's go back to our 10%. We raise the price 10%. And sales go down by 1%. So we'd have 1 over 10, or elasticity of 0.1. When the elasticity number is less than 1, that's called inelasticity. When the number is greater than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., then that would be elastic demand. The bigger the number, the more elastic. The lower the number, the less elastic. So this would be inelastic. 0.1 would be inelastic. And we say it's inelastic because we can change our price by 10%, but people don't change their buying behavior by more than 1%. In other words, we push price pressure on them by 10%, they respond at all. When they barely respond to a change in price, that's called price inelasticity of demand. If we, let's do another example of highly elastic. Let's say we raise the price by 1% and our sales, the quantity demanded, drops by 20%. Ooh, are they sensitive to a price change? Yeah, we only raised our price 1% and we lost a fifth of our sales. Our quantity demanded went down by 20% and we would have an elasticity of 20. That would be highly elastic. Now this formula is helpful because for many commodities, this figure can be determined, and there are studies on what the elasticity of demand is for various goods. And let's say that we have a good whose elasticity, and let me just pick a number, the elasticity is 4. There's been some economists out there, and they do some studies of what the elasticity is of this particular good, and they calculate that it's 4. Now, if we want to increase our volume by 20%, we want to increase the quantity demanded by 20%. So we put our 20% here. And now the question is, how much, if we want to increase this, how much do we need to decrease our price in order to get a 20% increase? Well, we know elasticity equals 4, and we know that we put a 20 up here, and we put an x down there, and now we do a very simple algebraic solving for x. And in this case, if it's put together with the division by x, what we can do is we could cross multiply. That would be 1. 4x equals 20. That would be one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is, well, we got to get the x all by itself on one side. We want to get the x over here. So just to make it long, I don't want to bore anybody here, but we could multiply whatever we do to one side, we've got to do to the other side. So if we multiply this side by x, this side by x, these two cross out, and now we got 4x equals 20. It's put together with a multiplication of 4, so to get x all by itself, we got to divide by the same amount, and we divide by 4 over here. The 4's cancel out, and x equals 5. So we would have to decrease right here, decrease, if we know what our elasticity of demand of our product is. We need to decrease our price by 5% in order to get a 20% increase in quantity demanded. Now, that is a practical use for elasticity of demand that gives you an idea of how much this changes when we change our price a little bit up or down. In our next session, we're going to expand that formula right here, and we're going to talk about elasticity as it relates to slope and how it doesn't relate to slope in the next session.